I thought I was just babysitting, but he made me feel like a woman again. Today, I have a story that took me by surprise in ways I still can't fully explain. I thought I was just babysitting, helping out, doing a favor. Nothing more. I didn't expect anything unusual. But then, something shifted. It wasn't the child that caught me off guard. It was him. The father. The way he looked at me spoke to me. The way his presence made me feel something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't about lust. It was something deeper, something dangerous. He didn't just notice me. He reminded me I was still a woman, and from that moment on, everything changed. What happened next will stay with me forever. Are you ready to hear what unfolded? When I agreed to babysit that night, I expected spilled juice cartoons and maybe a few tantrums, not a flood of emotions I had long forgotten. I was just there to help, to be the responsible adult. But as the evening wore on, laughter filled the living room, and unexpected glances sparked something deep inside me. It was not the child that caught my heart off guard. It was his older brother, newly returned from college, stepping in to check on things. One smile from him, and suddenly, I was not just babysitting. I was alive again. I had been feeling invisible for longer than I cared to admit. As a woman in her early 40s, life had slowly molded me into caretaker, provider, nurturer, everything but someone who was still seen. When my neighbor asked if I could babysit her youngest on a Friday night, I said yes without a second thought. It was supposed to be easy. Just a few hours of cartoon story time and maybe tucking the little one into bed before slipping back into my own quiet, uneventful routine. I had no idea that night would stir something inside me that I thought had been lost forever. The evening started exactly as expected. A few rounds of hide and seek, a scattered mess of toy dinosaurs across the living room floor, and soft giggles that warmed my heart. As the clock ticked past 9, I finally coaxed the sleepy-eyed boy into bed, reading him his favorite bedtime story, until his breathing deepened and he drifted into peaceful dreams. I tiptoed out of the room, careful not to wake him, and collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but content. I was scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly when I heard the front door open. My heart jumped slightly just from being startled, I told myself. I stood up, smoothing my dress over my hips, and turned to see who it was. And there he stood, Tyler, my neighbor's eldest son. I had not seen him in over a year. College had changed him. He had filled out, matured, and there was a certain confidence in his step that had not been there before. His deep brown eyes locked with mine, and for a second I forgot to breathe. He smiled, and it was like the air in the room shifted. "Hey," he said, his voice low and warm. "Thanks for helping out tonight." I mumbled something about it being no problem, brushing a stray hair behind my ear, suddenly all too aware of how casual I looked in my worn jeans and simple top. But Tyler did not seem to notice, or maybe he noticed in a way that made my cheeks flush with heat. He dropped his bag by the door and shrugged off his jacket, revealing a fitted t-shirt that clung to broad shoulders. He moved around the room with a casual ease, like he still belonged there, and something about that made me feel oddly comfortable and wildly on edge at the same time. He plopped down on the couch opposite me, stretching out his long legs, and smiled again. "You always were my favorite neighbor." He teased, a playful twinkle in his eyes. I laughed, feeling a little more at ease, and we slipped into easy conversation. We talked about his classes, his plans for the future, how much the neighborhood had changed. It felt good, effortless in a way. Conversations rarely did anymore. I found myself leaning in, soaking up the warmth of his attention, the way his gaze lingered a little too long on my face, my hands, my mouth. And God, it had been so long since I had felt that kind of focus, that kind of hunger, subtle, restrained, but unmistakable. At one point, he leaned back and stretched his shirt, riding up slightly to reveal a slice of toned skin. I averted my eyes quickly, my heart pounding. I reminded myself he was young, probably just being friendly. I was imagining things, but then he shifted closer, our knees almost touching, and the air between us grew heavy, charged. It was not just in my head. Tyler was seeing me, not as the helpful neighbor, not as someone's mom, not as an obligation, but as a woman he wanted. We sat there for what felt like hours, the conversation dipping into more personal territories. He asked about my dreams, my regrets, the life I wanted beyond the small confines of our sleepy town. No one had asked me those kinds of questions in years. His genuine interest disarmed me, opened me up in ways I had forgotten how to resist. There was no judgment in his eyes, only curiosity and a kind of admiration that left me breathless. The clock struck midnight, and yet neither of us moved to end the evening. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of old wood settling. The dim lighting threw soft shadows across Tyler's face, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw, the warmth in his expression. I caught myself staring, and when I looked away, he chuckled softly. "You are beautiful, you know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hit me like a wave. Not just because of what he said, but because of the way he said it, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. Tears prickled at the corners of my eyes, and I laughed them off, shaking my head. "You are just being kind," I muttered, but he leaned forward, closing the distance between us. "I mean it," he said, his hand brushing lightly against mine. It was an innocent touch, but it sent a jolt through my entire body. I had forgotten what it felt like to be desired, to be seen through eyes that admired every flaw, as if it only made me more worth wanting. I allowed myself to remember that before the responsibilities, before the labels, I had been someone's dream once. And sitting there across from Tyler, I felt like I could be again. When he finally stood to leave, there was a hesitation in the air, a question left unspoken between us. He smiled, that devastating smile, once more said goodnight, and disappeared into the guest room. I sat there alone in the soft glow of the lamp, my heart pounding, my skin tingling, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. I thought sleep would come easily, but as I lay in the quiet house, my mind refused to rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tyler's face, heard his voice telling me I was beautiful. Those words, so simple yet so rare, kept replaying in my head like a song I could not turn off. I tossed and turned, the weight of loneliness pressing heavier against my chest. Now that someone had touched that raw, aching part of me, I pulled the thin blanket tighter around myself, willing the feeling away, but it was no use. I was wide awake, restless, and very aware of the electric tension that had been left behind between us. A soft creak from the hallway broke the stillness. I froze, holding my breath. Another creak, then soft footsteps moving closer. My bedroom door slightly, ajar, shifted even more. My heart raced, hammering against my ribs. I sat up slowly, blinking into the darkness. Then there he was, Tyler, his silhouette framed by the faint light from the hallway, his presence both shocking and somehow completely inevitable. We stared at each other, suspended in a moment that seemed stitched together by all the unspoken things between us. I could not sleep," he said, his voice a low whisper that barely broke the silence. I swallowed hard, unsure what to say. Part of me screamed that this was wrong, that I should send him back to the guest room, but the bigger, lonelier part of me, the part that had gone untouched for far too long, ached to let him in. I nodded slightly, barely trusting my voice, and that was all the invitation he needed. Tyler stepped inside and closed the door behind him, sealing us off from the rest of the world. He moved toward the bed, cautious at first, like he was afraid I might change my mind. I pulled the blanket back wordlessly, offering him space. He slid in beside me, fully clothed, the mattress dipping under his weight. For a moment we just lay there side by side, a careful distance between us. My body was tense, every nerve on high alert. But when I felt the warmth radiating from him, some of the fear dissolved into something else, something heavier, sweeter. I turned slightly to look at him. His eyes were already on me, filled with something tender and intense. "You should not be here," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I know," he murmured back, but he did not move away. Neither did I. It felt as though an invisible thread was pulling us together, stronger than reason, stronger than fear. When he lifted his hand and brushed a strand of hair from my face, I shivered under his touch. His fingertips lingered against my cheek, feather light, like he was memorizing me. Slowly, carefully, he leaned in. I could have stopped him. I should have stopped him. But when his lips brushed mine, so soft and hesitant, I melted. A soft sigh escaped me as I leaned into the kiss, my hands finding their way to his shoulders. Tyler kissed me with a kind of reverence as though he understood exactly how fragile this moment was. His lips coaxed mine open, deepening the kiss, and suddenly the dam broke. All the loneliness, all the longing, everything I had bottled up inside poured out into that kiss. His hands skimmed down my arms over my waist, pulling me closer. I clutched his shirt, grounding myself in the reality of him, the warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. His touch was slow, unhurried, giving me every chance to pull away. But I did not want to. I needed this. I needed him. Every brush of his fingers, every gentle caress felt like a reminder that I was still alive, still worthy of being wanted. He kissed along my jaw, down my neck, each press of his mouth igniting sparks across my skin. I arched into him, craving more, desperate to feel every inch of him against me. His hands explored with care, never rushing, never demanding, as though he was trying to memorize every curve, every breathless sound I made. He pulled back for a moment, searching my eyes. "Are you sure?" he whispered, his voice with restraint. I cupped his face in my hands, nodding. "Yes," I breathed. "I want this. I want you." That was all it took. Tyler kissed me again, more urgently this time, and the last shreds of hesitation vanished. His hands slid beneath the hem of my shirt, his touch reverent as he bared my skin to his gaze. He looked at me like I was something precious, something he had been longing to touch but had never dared to believe he could have. Clothes fell away piece by piece until there was nothing left between us but skin and heat, and the quiet hum of shared need. Tyler's hands roamed my body with a kind of awe, as though he was discovering a treasure he had only ever dreamed about. Every touch, every kiss, every breath was slow and deliberate, drawing me deeper into him, into us. He worshipped me with his hands, his mouth, his whispered words of adoration. When he finally entered me, it was not rushed or desperate. It was slow, deep, and achingly tender. I gasped at the sensation, the overwhelming fullness of him, the way he moved with such careful reverence. Tyler kissed away the tears that slipped down my cheeks. Tears of release, of gratitude, of something too big to name. He moved inside me with a rhythm that spoke of reverence and devotion, every thrust, every caress, building a crescendo of sensations that left me trembling. We moved together in a dance as old as time, our bodies finding a rhythm that felt natural, inevitable. Tyler whispered my name like a prayer, his hands framing my face as though I might disappear if he did not hold me close. I clung to him, my fingers digging into his shoulders, meeting the solid, reassuring presence of him as the pleasure built to an unbearable peak. When release finally came, it ripped through me like a tidal wave, leaving me gasping and clinging to him as he followed me over the edge. We collapsed together, tangled and breathless, the world narrowing down to the shared heartbeat between us. For a long moment we just lay there, wrapped around each other, the weight of what we had done hanging in the air. But there was no regret, no shame, only a quiet, overwhelming sense of rightness. Tyler pressed soft kisses against my forehead, my cheeks, my lips murmuring sweet nothings that made my heart ache in the best possible way. I held him close, letting myself believe, if only for a night, that I could be more than what life had tried to reduce me to, that I could still be seen, desired, loved. The night stretched on around us, the house silent, the world outside forgotten. In Tyler's arms, I found something I had thought I had lost forever, a piece of myself that had been buried under years of loneliness and self-doubt. And as sleep finally claimed me safe and warm against his chest, I knew that no matter what tomorrow would bring, tonight was mine. Hours morning crept in slowly, sunlight filtering through the curtains in soft, muted streams. I stirred, feeling the unfamiliar weight of Tyler's arm draped over me. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to sink deeper into the warmth, pretending that this was not complicated, that this was something I deserved without consequence. His steady breathing against my neck grounded me in a way that nothing else had in years. But reality, cruel and unforgiving, began to seep back into my consciousness. I was not some carefree woman who could fall into a lover's arms without thought. I was a mother, a guardian of trust, and Tyler was far more than just a fleeting temptation. Guilt clawed at my chest, even as my body still ached for him, for the closeness we had shared. Slowly, carefully, I slipped out from under his arm, feeling the cold rush in where his warmth had been. He stirred but did not wake his face, relaxed in a way that made my heart twist painfully. I watched him for a moment longer, memorizing the boyish curve of his mouth, the way his lashes rested against his cheek. 1,000 questions screamed inside my head. What had we done? What would happen now? Could we pretend it never happened, bury it under the silence of morning light? I gathered my clothes silently, heart pounding with every tiny sound that echoed in the stillness of the house. Each step away from him felt like tearing myself apart, but I forced myself to keep moving. I pulled on my robe and crept out of the room, closing the door behind me with agonizing slowness. The hallway felt different now, heavier somehow, like the walls themselves had witnessed my fall from grace. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter, breathing hard, trying to summon some version of myself that could make sense of this mess. Coffee seemed like the most normal thing to do, the most human. As I waited for it to brew, I stared blankly out the window, watching the world wake up, pretending for a few fragile moments that mine had not just been turned upside down. When Tyler appeared in the doorway, rumpled and uncertain, my breath caught in my throat. His eyes met mine, and for a second neither of us spoke. Words felt too small, too clumsy for the enormity of what lay between us. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out instinctively, then stopping midair as if unsure whether he still had the right. "About last night," he began, his voice raw. I shook my head, silencing him. I could not hear it. Not yet. If he said it was a mistake, it would shatter something delicate inside me. If he said it meant something, it would terrify me even more. I turned away, busying myself with pouring the coffee, my hands trembling just enough to spill a few drops. Tyler crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hand covering mine, gently stilling the shaking. I refused to meet his eyes, afraid of what I might see there, pity, regret, or worse, tenderness I had no right to claim. "You are not alone," he said quietly. That broke me. The dam inside me, the one I had held together for so long, cracked open. I choked out a broken laugh, tears spilling down my cheeks faster than I could wipe them away. Tyler pulled me into his arms without hesitation, holding me tightly as I wept against his chest. He did not try to hush me, did not tell me it would be okay. He simply held me, his embrace solid and unwavering. When the storm inside me finally began to ebb, I pulled back slightly, wiping at my face with trembling fingers. Tyler cupped my chin, forcing me to look at him. "I do not regret it," he said fiercely. "Not 1 second. His words both soothed and terrified me. I wanted to believe him, to wrap myself in the safety he offered, but the voice of doubt was louder. How could this possibly end well? He was young, with his whole life ahead of him. I was just a brief detour, a chapter he would eventually outgrow. Still, when he leaned down and kissed me slowly, tenderly, like he had all the time in the world, I let him. I let myself forget for a little longer. The day passed in a haze of stolen glances and cautious touches. Tyler stayed close, never pushing, never demanding, simply there whenever I faltered. We cooked breakfast together, our hands brushing the air thick with unspoken words. When he laughed at some stupid joke, I made the sound, filled the house with a lightness I had almost forgotten existed. And yet, beneath the laughter, the tension simmered, an undercurrent of fear and longing we both pretended not to notice. As night fell again, the weight of choice settled heavier on my shoulders. I knew this could not continue. No matter how much my heart protested, love, or whatever fragile thing had blossomed between us, was not always enough to bridge the gap between reality and dreams. When Tyler reached for my hand as we sat on the couch, I held it tightly, savoring the feeling even as tears blurred my vision. Maybe we were not meant to last. Maybe this was just a moment, fleeting and beautiful and tragic in its impossibility, but it was ours, and for tonight that would have to be enough. The next morning, the air felt heavier, filled with an unspoken understanding. Tyler stirred beside me, his arm tightening around my waist as if he could delay the inevitable. But we both knew reality had already caught up to us. I turned to face him, memorizing every detail. His warm eyes, the slight curve of his lips, the way he looked at me like I was something precious. "We cannot stay like this," I whispered, my voice breaking. Tyler's jaw tensed, but he nodded slowly. He was young with dreams yet to chase, and I was a woman who had lived too much to ask him to stay trapped in my story. As much as it tore at me, I knew letting go was the only kindness I could offer. We spent the last hours wrapped in each other, speaking little, holding on to the fleeting connection that had defied reason and time. When he finally stood at the door, suitcase in hand, he turned back once more, a sad smile on his face. "You made me feel seen," he said. "You made me feel loved." And just like that, he was gone. I closed the door gently, resting my forehead against the wood. I knew life would move forward the way it always did. But I would carry this secret place inside me, a memory of a night when two broken souls found each other, even if just for a moment, and remembered how it felt to be whole. I walked into that house thinking I was just there to help out, watch a child, do a job, nothing more. But somehow, in the quiet moments between diaper changes, bedtime stories, and polite conversation, something stirred inside me that I hadn't felt in years. He didn't touch me. He didn't cross any obvious line. But the way he looked at me, the attention he gave me, the warmth in his words, it reminded me I was still a woman, not just a helper, not just someone forgotten. But here's where it gets complicated. Was I wrong for feeling something? Was he wrong for giving me that look? Was it just human connection? Or was it emotional temptation wrapped in polite conversation? Some people will say I read too much into it. Others might say emotional intimacy can be just as powerful and just as risky as anything physical. So I ask you, where is the line between being seen and being seduced? Between appreciation and danger? Let me know what you think in the comments. Be honest. Would you have felt the same or walked away without giving it a second thought? Follow me so I have more motivation to create emotional, thought-provoking stories like this, or simply encourage me by pressing number 1 in the comments. Your support truly means the world.